The restaurant was quiet at that hour. Not empty, never empty, not at Young's, not on a Friday, but the kind of quiet that settles when the last bottle of wine has been opened and the conversations have gone soft around the edges. She moved between the tables the way she moved through every room she had ever occupied, without friction, without announcement, without leaving anything behind that she hadn't chosen to leave. His table was in the corner. It always was, apparently. The maitre d' had mentioned it twice before she started her shift. A nervous habit. The way people mention things they think matter to someone who clearly has power over them, even when that power is invisible. Corner table, window view. Mr. Kwan prefers still water. She had nodded and said nothing. She noticed him before he noticed her. That was always how it went. Before I tell you what happened when their eyes finally met, if this kind of story is the reason you stay up past midnight, you already know what to do. Like, subscribe, and leave a comment telling me, would you have let him get that close? Now, back to her. Daniel Kwan was not what she expected. She had read the file. Of course she had read the file. She read every file on every person within a 3-table radius of wherever she chose to stand. And the file had said, 38, self-made, construction empire rebranded as tech infrastructure, known for precision and a short tolerance for incompetence. The photographs had shown a man who wore his success like a second skin, comfortable in it, not performing it. In person, he was quieter than the file suggested. He sat alone, which surprised her. Men like him rarely sat alone in places like this. They brought entourages, or they brought women, or they brought both, and they used the audience as evidence of their own importance. He had none of that. A glass of water, untouched. A phone, face down. His jacket was folded over the chair beside him with a carefulness that struck her as almost private. The gesture of someone who was used to being watched and had learned to perform even the small things. Or someone who genuinely did not like wrinkles. She cataloged both possibilities and moved toward his table. Still water, she said, placing the glass. Not a question. He looked up. There was a pause. Not long. 2 seconds, maybe 3. But she had spent 15 years reading the pauses in rooms where a second of silence could mean an agreement or a war, and she read this one clearly. He was looking at her the way people look at things that don't quite fit the category they've been placed in. Not attraction, not yet, or not only. More like recognition without context. Like hearing a word in a foreign language and knowing it means something important before you know what it means. Thank you, he said. She moved away before he could say anything else. This was the shape of the first week. He came on Tuesday and Friday. Always the corner table, always alone. She brought his water and later his food, and he thanked her each time with the same quality of attention. Present, unhurried, slightly more than the situation required. She gave him nothing in return except efficiency. She was very good at efficiency. She had spent a long time perfecting the art of being in a room without being in it. On the second Friday, he asked her name. She looked at him, let the silence sit exactly 1 beat longer than was comfortable. Gia, she said. It was not her name. Or, it was one of them. She had 4 names, depending on which life she was currently occupying, and none of them were the one her mother had given her, because her mother had given her a name that felt too soft for what she had become. Gia was simple. Easy to say, easy to forget, if that was what the situation required. He said it once, quietly, as if testing the weight of it. Gia. She went back to the kitchen. Later, in the apartment above the restaurant, not the apartment the restaurant knew about, the other one, 3 floors up, with the secure line and the encrypted laptop and the window that looked out over the block in 4 directions. She stood at the window with a cup of tea she had stopped tasting 20 minutes ago and thought about nothing in particular. thought about the way he said her name, decided it meant nothing. Put it away. She was very good at putting things away. Her name, her real name, the one on documents that did not officially exist, was Yeon Ji-ah. She was 34 years old. She ran the Cheongpa network, which was not what it was called in any official record because it had no official records, which was the point. 12 years ago, she had been the youngest person to take the head position in an organization that had existed for 40 years before she was born. She had taken it not through violence. Violence was easy. Violence was what people did when they had run out of better ideas. But through the patient, surgical rearrangement of loyalties and information until the men above her had found themselves, one by one, in positions where stepping aside was simply the most rational choice available. None of them had been happy about it. All of them had done it. She did not have rivals, exactly. She had problems that had not yet become urgent. The current problem was named Song Hyun-woo, and it was the reason she was here, in this apartment, in this cover, in this restaurant, where a billionaire with careful hands had started looking at her like she was a word he almost knew. Song had been moving against her quietly for 8 months. Small incursions, deniable losses, the kind of pressure that was designed to be felt, but not attributed. He was waiting for her to make a move that could be used against her. She was waiting for him to make a mistake that could be used against him. In the meantime, she had removed herself from her usual locations and embedded herself somewhere no one would think to look for her, which was a restaurant in central Seoul, where she carried plates and memorized orders and was invisible in the way that service workers are always invisible to people who are used to being served. It was the kind of invisible that Daniel Kwan, apparently, could not see. The third week, he brought a file to the restaurant, set it beside his water glass, ate his dinner alone with the file open, making occasional notes in the margins with a pen that cost more than most people's rent. She refilled his water twice without him acknowledging it, which was exactly what she wanted, except that on the second refill he said, without looking up, "You do that thing?" She stopped. "What thing?" "You appear and disappear without making any sound." He looked up then. "Most people make sound." "Most people aren't paying attention to what they're doing," she said. He looked at her for a moment. Not the way men usually looked at her in settings like this. Not assessment, not desire dressed up as interest. Something more lateral. That's an interesting way to think about it. She left before the conversation could become one, but she thought about it that night. Thought about the precision of his observation. Not what she looked like, but how she moved. Men who noticed what she looked like were navigating their own hunger. Men who noticed how she moved were paying a different kind of attention. She filed this under relevant. By the fourth week, she had built a fairly complete picture of Daniel Kwan that had nothing to do with his file. The file had given her facts. Observation had given her the gaps between facts, which were always more useful. He ate slowly, which meant he wasn't eating to fuel himself. He was eating to think. He turned his phone face down but checked it every 11 minutes, which meant there was something he was waiting for, but didn't want to appear to be waiting for. He read the same page of his file 3 times before writing anything in the margin, which meant he was not impulsive. He processed, then committed. He never sent food back. He never asked for anything twice. He tipped exactly 20%, not the ostentatious over-tipping of men who want to be remembered, and not the calculated under-tipping of men who feel entitled to service. 20%. A man who understood the value of what he received without needing to announce it. She was not attracted to him. She noticed things about him, which was different. On the 5th Friday, he wasn't alone. She saw this from across the room. A woman at his table, mid-30s, well-dressed in the way that suggested old money rather than new, leaning toward him with the body language of someone who had a prior claim. Yeonjia assessed this in approximately 4 seconds and felt nothing that she needed to name. She brought their water, She did not make eye contact with him. She was very good at this. He made eye contact with her. Not for long. Not in a way the woman across from him would have caught. Just a half-second of direct contact that said, she wasn't sure what it said. She filed it under, irrelevant, and moved away. The woman left before dessert. He stayed. Yanjia was clearing an adjacent table when he said, "She's my business partner, in case you were wondering." She did not look up from the plates she was stacking. I wasn't. You noticed, though. I notice everything. She picked up the tray. It's part of the job. Is that what it is? She finally looked at him. He was watching her with that same quality of attention, patient, unhurried, slightly off-center, like someone who was used to conversations that meant less than they appeared and had developed a sensitivity to the ones that might mean more. She gave him nothing. She was very good at giving nothing. "Enjoy your evening, Mr. Kwan," she said. She walked away. She did not allow herself to think about the expression on his face. She put it away, quickly and cleanly, the way she put everything away, and went back to the work of being invisible. What she did not do, and this was the thing she noticed later, in the apartment, at the window, with the untasted tea, was tell him he was wrong. She had noticed, and she had not corrected his assumption that she was noticing for reasons that had nothing to do with professional habit. She filed this under, something to watch. The following Tuesday he didn't come. She told herself this was information, noted, cataloged, deprioritized. She told herself this while standing at the side station with nothing to do for 30 seconds and finding herself facing the corner table, which was occupied by two men having an argument about equity distribution that she could have settled in 4 words but didn't because she wasn't here. She was just a waitress. She was invisible. She was no one. The Tuesday after that, he came back. He sat at the corner table. He ordered his water. And when she brought it, he said, "I owe you an apology." She waited. "I made an assumption last week that I shouldn't have made, about why you notice things." He paused. It was presumptuous. She looked at him for a moment. She was very good at looking at people without letting them see what the look cost. "It was accurate," she said. "That makes it less presumptuous." He was quiet for a moment. The quality of his silence was different from most people's silences. It wasn't the silence of someone who had run out of things to say. It was the silence of someone who was deciding which true thing to say next. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You're going to anyway." The faintest shift at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. "What are you doing here?" "Working," she said. "I don't mean tonight." He looked at her steadily. "I mean here. At this restaurant. Doing this." The question was more precise than it had any right to be. She felt something tighten in her chest. Not alarm. Not quite. The specific sensation of a question landing closer to the truth than it should have. She gave him the answer she had prepared for exactly this kind of question. The answer that was true enough to be convincing and incomplete enough to be safe. "I needed to be somewhere quiet for a while," she said. He nodded slowly, and then, "I understand that." She believed him. That was the unexpected part. She was accustomed to sympathy that was performance. Men who said they understood because understanding was a useful tool in certain kinds of acquisition. His understanding felt lateral, non-transactional. Like someone who had his own version of the same need and was recognizing it in her from the outside. She didn't know what to do with that. She went back to work. Later that night, on the secure line, she spoke to Min Seok. Her second, her most trusted operative. The person who had been with her through every restructuring, every crisis, every moment when the organization could have fractured and didn't because she had held it together with both hands. He gave her the song update. Still quiet, still building, still waiting. The pressure on the northern supply chain had eased slightly. Two of Song's mid-level people had made contact through back channels. Not defection, not yet, but proximity to it. The kind of contact that meant Song's people were beginning to calculate alternative futures. Another month, Min-seok said. Maybe 6 weeks. Less, she said. He'll move before he's ready. He always does. You think? I know. She was quiet for a moment. How is the restaurant cover holding? Clean. No one's looking. No one I know about, she said. Which isn't the same thing. After she ended the call, she stood at the window for a long time. The city moved below her the way it always moved. Indifferent, continuous, full of transactions she had no part in. She thought about Daniel Kwan asking what she was doing here. She thought about the way he said it. Not suspicious, not tactical. Just genuinely curious about a person he had decided was worth being curious about. She could not remember the last time someone had been curious about her in that register. The register of ordinary human interest, without angle or agenda. The men in her world were curious about her weaknesses, her decisions, her intentions. The men outside her world were curious about her surface, what she looked like, where she was from, whether she was available. Neither kind of curiosity touched what Daniel Kwan seemed to be touching when he looked at her. She told herself this was a vulnerability. She was right. The weeks had a texture she hadn't expected. He came twice a week. He brought his files and his silences. He asked questions that were specific without being invasive. He asked about the neighborhood, about how long the restaurant had been there, about a painting on the wall that she'd never noticed until he pointed it out. He never asked about her life outside this room. She thought at first this was strategy, withholding the direct approach to make her come toward him. And then she revised the interpretation. He wasn't withholding. He was respecting the shape of what she was willing to give. He was following her lead without appearing to follow her lead. This was more sophisticated than she had expected from a man who had never, as far as she knew, needed to follow anyone's lead. One evening, the restaurant was hit by a double booking crisis and she was juggling 3 tables at once, moving fast, making decisions in real time, redirecting staff with gestures rather than words, solving 4 problems in the time it took most people to identify one. It was nothing. It was a Tuesday. She didn't think about it. She looked up, and he was watching her. Not with the expression of a man watching a beautiful woman, with the expression of someone watching a person operate at the edge of their actual capacity, not their waitressing capacity, something larger, and recognizing it. His expression was unguarded in the way expressions become when the person wearing them forgets to manage them. She saw it for less than 2 seconds before he looked away. She felt it in her hands for an hour. The following Friday, she made a decision that she told herself was analytical. She sat down, not at his table, at the counter beside it, on her break, with a cup of tea, close enough to be proximate without making it a declaration. He looked up from his file. She didn't look at him. She looked at the middle distance and drank her tea. After 2 minutes, he said, "Long shift?" "Average," she said. He closed his file. She noticed this in her peripheral vision, the deliberate close, the setting down of the pen. "Tell me something true," he said. She turned to look at him. "About what?" "About anything." He looked steady, not playful, not performing. "You never say anything you don't mean. I've been watching, so just say something you mean." She was quiet for a long moment, long enough that the tea cooled slightly in her cup. She thought about what she could say that was true and safe and small enough not to matter. She said, "I'm very tired." He looked at her, not with pity, not with the ready comfort that people deploy when they want to position themselves as a solution, with something quieter. Recognition again. That same lateral understanding. "Yeah," he said. I can see that. She didn't say anything after that. She finished her tea and went back to work. But the tiredness she'd named felt different for having been named. Not lighter, exactly, but less hidden. Less something she was managing alone. She did not like this. She noted it. She did not like it. 3 days later, Min-seok called with a development that changed the shape of everything. Song Hyun-woo had made contact, not through back channels. Directly. He had sent a message to a number that should not have existed, through a path that should not have been traceable, proposing a meeting. The message was 7 words. I know where you are. Let's talk. She stood in the kitchen of the secure apartment with Min-seok's voice in her ear and her hand very still on the counter, and she looked at the wall, and she thought, 7 words. He knows where she is. He has known long enough to find the direct line. He has not moved against her. He wants to talk. This meant one of 3 things. He was bluffing. He wanted a truce on terms she hadn't been offered yet. Or he was setting a stage. What do you want to do? Min-seok asked. Nothing yet, she said. He knows you're there. He thinks he knows where I am. That's different. She was quiet. Give me 24 hours. She ended the call. She stood in the kitchen for a while. The city moved outside. The restaurant below her was filling with dinner service. And she thought about a man in the corner with a closed file and careful hands saying, I can see that, and meaning it in the way of someone who saw more than she had permitted. She thought about how long she had been performing fine. She went down to the restaurant that evening not because she was scheduled, but because the alternative was the apartment and the secure line and the particular quality of silence that had started to feel, over the past weeks, like a noise she had learned to hear. She took a section. She worked. And when he walked in, unscheduled, not his usual day, a Wednesday, she felt something in her chest that she had been cataloging as irrelevant for 6 weeks, finally asked to be cataloged as something else. He saw her immediately. He didn't perform surprise. He crossed to his usual table and sat down, and she brought his water without being asked, and he said, You're not usually here on Wednesdays. You're not usually here on Wednesdays, she returned. He looked at her carefully. You look different tonight. She set down the water. Tired. Not tired. He paused. Like something's happened. The precision of it stopped her. She was standing beside his table with an empty tray, and this man who knew nothing, not a single true thing about who she was, what she ran, what was moving against her, what was always moving against her, had just read her face with a clarity that her closest lieutenants hadn't managed in 15 years. I'm fine, she said. I know, he said. That's what I mean. She looked at him. He looked back. The restaurant moved around them, sound and light and other people's ordinary evenings. And between them something had shifted without permission, without announcement, the way significant things often shifted. Invisibly and all at once. She went to get his menu. He left earlier than usual that night. On his way out, he stopped beside her, not touching, not performing the approach. Gia. She turned. He was looking at her with that open, unmanaged expression she had seen twice now, the one that appeared when he forgot to manage it. Whatever it is, you don't have to handle it like you're alone. She said nothing. He left. She stood in the middle of the restaurant for exactly 4 seconds. 4 seconds of complete internal stillness. And then she put away what he'd said with the same clean efficiency she put everything away, and went back to work, and did not take it out again until much later. At 2 a.m, she made a decision. Not about Song. That decision had already made itself. She would meet him. On her terms, on ground she chose, and she would find out what he knew and what he wanted, and she would make the problem Song had become into the solution she needed. This was what she did. This was what she was. The decision she made at 2 in the morning was smaller, or it felt smaller. She wasn't sure anymore. She opened a communication channel she rarely opened, clean, encrypted, untraceable, and sent a query to her intelligence team about Daniel Kwan, not the file she'd already read. Deeper. She wanted to know, who was he when no one was performing for him? Who were the people he protected? What had he built that he hadn't needed to build? The response came in 4 hours. She read it at dawn, standing at the window with the city going pale and quiet below her, and she understood something she hadn't understood before. He was not like the other men in his category. He had taken 3 significant financial losses in the past 7 years that could have been avoided if he had made different choices. Choices that would have required him to compromise people who trusted him. He had not made those choices. He had taken the losses. The people who trusted him still trusted him. He built things. He was careful with what he built. He was careful with people the way he was careful with his jacket, with a kind of private respect for the things that deserved to last. She put down the file. She stood at the window and she allowed herself for the first time to look directly at what had been building for 6 weeks without looking at it. She was very good at not looking at things that destabilized her. She was very good at naming vulnerability as tactical liability and filing it away. She had been doing this her entire adult life because the alternative, feeling things fully in a world that would use what she felt against her, had never been a real option. But she was looking now, and what she saw was this. There was a man who had no idea who she was, who had no access to her real name or her real life, or the weight of what she carried, and he had still somehow seen her. Not the performance, not the surface, not the careful arrangement of controlled competence she wore like armor, but the tiredness underneath. The person inside the armor who hadn't rested in a very long time. He had seen it, and he had not used it. This was, in her world, extraordinary. The meeting with Song happened 4 days later. She chose the location, a room above a restaurant in Mapo that she had controlled for 9 years, every exit mapped, every angle covered. Minseok 2 floors up with 4 people she trusted completely. Song came alone, which was either arrogance or sincerity. She had been prepared for either. He was older than she remembered, grayer. He sat across from her with the careful posture of a man who understood that every movement was being read, and she sat across from him with the arrangement of absolute stillness that she had perfected over many years. "You've been very patient," he said. "I've been very quiet," she said. "Those aren't the same thing." He acknowledged this with a small nod. "I came to make an offer." "I know," she said. "I haven't decided yet whether it's worth hearing." "It is." He paused. "The pressure from the north. That was me. I want you to know that. I'm not here pretending I haven't been moving against you. I have been. I'm telling you because what I'm about to propose only works if we start from honesty." She looked at him. People who start from honesty in this room usually have something they need that they can't get any other way. "Yes," he said. "I do." He told her. It took 12 minutes. She listened without moving, without responding, without letting any of what she was calculating show on her face. When he was finished, she was quiet for a long time. "You're asking me to extend protection over something that benefits you significantly and benefits me marginally," she said. "It benefits you in ways that don't appear in the short term," he said. "Everything that benefits me appears to me immediately, or it doesn't benefit me." He looked at her for a moment. "You know what I've noticed in 15 years of watching your organization?" She waited. "You've never made a decision that was only short term. Every sacrifice you've made, every lateral move, every loss you took, it paid out eventually. Sometimes 3 years later, sometimes 5. He paused. "You think long," longer than anyone I've ever operated against. Which is why this offer is for you, and not for anyone else. She looked at the table. She looked at her hands. She thought about the offer. She thought about the cost of it, the shape of it, the way it would move things in a direction she hadn't been planning but might be able to use. She thought about 15 years of thinking long. "Give me 1 week," she said. "You have it," he said. He left. Minseok came down. She told him the shape of it, not the details, the shape, and watched him calculate. He was quiet for a long time. "What do you think?" he finally asked. "I think," she said carefully, "that I need to go back to the restaurant." He looked at her. Minseok knew her, which meant he knew not to ask certain questions. "When?" he said. "Tonight," she said. She walked in at 9:15. He was there. Of course he was there. Friday, corner table, still water, file open, pen in hand. She crossed the restaurant and he looked up, and she crossed to his table and she sat down in the empty chair across from him. He closed the file. She folded her hands on the table and she looked at him for a long moment in the low light of the restaurant, and she thought about all the things that were true that she couldn't say, and all the things that she could say and had been choosing not to say. And she thought about the difference between being safe and being alone, and about how, for a very long time, those two things had been the same. "I owe you something," she said. He waited. "You said something last week." She was choosing each word with care, about not handling things like I'm alone. "I remember," he said. "I've been handling things alone for a long time." She paused. "I'm good at it. I'm very good at it." She looked at her hands. It's a very specific kind of tired, the kind where no one around you knows how tired you are because you can't let them know, because knowing would change something. She looked up. "And I think you know what that's like." He looked at her steadily. No movement. No performance. Just the kind of attention she had been receiving from him for 6 weeks, and still hadn't found a way to make herself walk away from. "Yeah," he said. "I do." The restaurant moved around them. Someone laughed too loudly at a nearby table. The kitchen made its distant, metallic sounds. She was aware of all of it, and aware of none of it. "I want to tell you something," he said. "And I need you to know it's not a move. It's not anything. I just think you should hear it." She waited. "Whoever you are," he said, "outside of this room, whatever you're carrying, it hasn't made you smaller. It's just made you very, very careful." He paused. "And I think you've been careful for long enough that you've forgotten what it feels like to just exist, without managing it." She was very still. "I don't know what's going on in your life," he said. "I don't know what you're protecting or what's moving against you or what you decided today that you're carrying right now. But I can see that you decided something and it cost you. And I think you came here because here is the only place where someone who doesn't know all of it can still see you." She didn't say anything. She was not going to say anything. "Gia," he said. "That's not my name," she said. The silence that followed was different from all the other silences. She felt it. The click of the thing she'd said, the door she had just opened, the irreversibility of it. She had said it without planning to, or she had planned to say it for longer than she understood. He looked at her carefully, not startled, not alarmed, with the attentiveness of someone who had been expecting a door to open somewhere and was now simply noting which door it had been. "Okay," he said. "My name is Yeon Ji-ah." She watched him. She watched for the calculation, the recalibration, the rapid reconstruction of context that should have happened on the face of any intelligent person hearing a piece of information that didn't fit. She watched for the thing that would tell her she had made a mistake. He said, "Yeonjia," the same way he'd said Gia, testing the weight. Does that change anything I should know about how to treat you? She looked at him. No, she said. It changes other things. He nodded slowly. He didn't ask what other things. He reached for his water glass and he held it, and he didn't drink from it, just held it. And she understood that he was giving her the room she needed to decide what came next. He was going to sit here all night if she needed him to. He was not going to push. He was not going to reach. He was going to wait. She looked at the table. She looked at the restaurant. She looked at the window that showed the street outside, the city that was also hers in ways she could not explain to him tonight. Maybe not ever. Maybe someday. She said, I need to go. Okay, he said. I'll be back. She said it before she could decide not to. I'll be back and I'll tell you more, when I can. He looked at her with an expression she had no clean category for. It was not hope. It was not triumph. It was the expression of someone who had been seen seeing someone and found it returned, and who was very carefully not making too much of it because they understood that too much would break the thing. I'll be here, he said. She stood. She straightened. She walked through the restaurant the way she always walked, without friction, without announcement. She pushed open the door and the city came up around her, familiar and cold and hers, and she stood on the pavement for one full moment in which she did not manage anything. She let herself be tired. She let herself have given him her name. She let herself be a person standing on a street who had said something true and not taken it back. Then she began to walk. Behind her, through the window, the corner table was still lit. He hadn't moved. She didn't look back. She didn't need to, but she knew, with the same precision that she knew everything else, that she had shifted something tonight. Not the organization, not the problem with song, not the careful architecture of control that was her life. Something smaller, more irreversible. She had given him her name. He still didn't know what it meant. He would. Not tonight. Not because she'd planned the timing, but because some things unfold at the speed they unfold, and no amount of control changes that. He would learn who she was. He would learn what her name meant in this city, in these streets, in the specific grammar of power that governed everything here. And she still didn't know what he would do with it. For the first time in a very long time, she had done something she couldn't control. She kept walking. The city opened around her, wide and indifferent and ordinary, and somewhere behind her, a man was sitting at a corner table with her name in his mouth, like a word he didn't have a meaning for yet, and she was afraid, and she was not turning back, and both of those things were true at the same time. And she was beginning to think that both things being true at the same time was the closest she had come, in 15 years, to being honest.